What's up, Sean?
Hey, Danny.
As a church, we've been going through Romans 8, and Romans 8 has some pretty significant implications for our life and our life in God. We began with this whole notion that we are dirty, awful rags of sinners outside of God, and we're hopeless and have no ability to come back to right standing with God. Pretty heavy, pretty dense stuff, but this beautiful message in transition takes place in Romans 3, where it talks about this idea that because of Jesus, because of the cross, because of Christ, that you and I now have access to friendship, to relationship, to intimacy, to union. We have peace with God again, back to how it was in the garden. And then the next 4 chapters talked about how we're no longer in sin, how we were once in sin, we're no longer in sin. We were once in the flesh, we're no longer in the flesh. Life in the spirit versus life in the flesh. And something I've noticed across some of my friends, just people in the church, and just a general thing across Christians, is that oftentimes people who gave their life to God, they spend their time in the outworking of their faith being more a measure of not sinning and less of a measure of building relationship with God. So they take this prize, they take this gift of freedom, they take this wonderful inheritance that God has given us in Christ himself, and they turn it and let their whole life become about sin management. It's like, oh, I'm free. I'm not going to sin. 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 And it becomes everything. So much so that the entire journey of sanctification becomes how much or little did I do this very specific thing, which of course that's a part of it. But what has struck you and I a lot about God is that as a result of being free from sin, we're offered something beautiful, something almost tangible. It's not tangible, but it feels so tangible at times, in that thing being relationship with God. And in your life, you've connected so much with God through friendship. And me, it's been so much through sonship. And in Romans 8, verses 14, it says, "For all who are led by God are sons of God." And I love that, because it's not for all who are led by God, stop sinning and never do it again. Because the sin is dead, the sin is gone. It's saying, guys, there's more. It's like, yeah, you're free from sin. Time to move on. Look what's on the other side. And it's, hey, if you are led by God, you are now sons. So the identity is no longer not a sinner. The identity now is son. And that is so striking to me. And I want to hear from you a little bit. What does that look like in your own life? You've been walking with the Lord for what, 6-7 years now? 6 years?
Something like that.
5 years? I don't even know.
I don't know.
Since you were 17, that's all I know, right?
Hard math.
And well, how old are you? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Big math.
Okay, yeah. But I'm curious, what does that look like for you of contending to not sin, contending for purity, wholeness, oneness with God, but also moving on from the identity of no longer a sinner and embracing the identity of son, of friend? Yeah.
That's great. I think the first thing that comes to mind is John Wimber had this quote.
You love John.
I'm going to keep quoting him. He's a goat.
Wouldn't be a convo with you without it.
Yeah, no. He has this quote where he says something along the lines of, "I'm focused on him and doing his bidding. It doesn't leave a lot of time for me and my sinning."
Ooh. I see why you quote him.
He made that rhyme.
Did you just pull that out of nowhere?
It used to be my phone background.
Okay.
And there's something to that where it's not just like you're talking about, I'm no longer a slave of sin. I'm no longer a slave of sin. I can't sin. I won't sin. I don't do this. I won't do this.
Just a sinner saved by grace, right? It's just,
right.
Yeah.
But there's this shift in mindset where we're led by the Spirit. And what John is talking about there is walking in friendship, walking in love, walking in intimacy with the Lord, where, our minds are preoccupied about him and we're walking with him intimately, so much so that our minds are actually being renewed and transformed to reality. Yeah. That our renewal, our life, everything that is new about us comes from him, not from our own effort trying not to do something.
So good.
That's never really worked. That's never worked really.
Yeah, literally ever. It's what got us in trouble in the first place. Yeah. It was us.
And I really think about Peter and John. Peter, James, and John were some of the closest to Jesus out of the 12. They saw him at the Transfiguration. They saw him raise people from the dead that the other disciples didn't see. And the distinctive between Peter and John was that Peter is this stubborn, forthright, I'm going to do this type of guy where, Jesus is like, I'm telling you, Peter, like, you will deny me. And he's like, I won't.
Yeah.
I won't, Lord.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He's so focused on not doing it that he falls.
He sounds just like me.
We can relate.
Yeah.
And except John is known as the beloved, John the beloved,
Yeah.
the disciple whom Jesus loved. And at his hour of greatest need on the cross, John is there at the foot of the cross because he loves the Lord, because he's walking in friendship and intimacy with the Lord. And Jesus entrusts John with the most precious thing on the earth, his own mother, his flesh and blood. He says, John, here's your mother. Take care of my mom.
Yeah.
And isn't John saying, Lord, I'm going to do it for you, but it's, Lord, I love you, so whatever you want, I will.
Yeah.
And John's the only one at the Last Supper to lean on Jesus' breast and ask him a question that nobody else will ask.
Yeah.
So Peter's trying to step out in this boldness, saying, Lord, I'm not going to deny you. And John's at Jesus' breast and just naturally has a boldness because of this love and this relationship and this intimacy.
It's a completely different perspective.
And my mind goes of like, well, maybe there's a reason John didn't get martyred according to church history, and he was the one that lived the longest out of any of the other apostles.
That's a big claim there.
It's skeptical. We're not going to go that far. But there's something to the nearness of John that led him to just naturally perform. Wow. In our performance culture, it's all about getting the right grades, getting in the right school, getting the right internship. And if you don't reach the standard, you're a failure and you're a mess. And you don't fit in with the rest of us. Whereas the way of Jesus is turned around, where Peter, again, falls in that same example, but the invitation of Jesus is to be near. And that out of that nearness, we then perform like we never thought we could.
Yeah, it's so good. Trying to catch my thought. I had a question I wanted to ask you.
Let me ask you, how have you seen sonship specifically live out as a fruit and as a staple, as a core belief as you've walked out in this, to not then live a life of sin?
Where do I start? The amount of times that I've told God, I will never do that again. I could fill half the world, it feels like. So much of my life and my walk has been me contending to not be reliant on myself and me contending to let go and me contending almost to stop contending so much for everything and just trust God. Yeah. And when it comes to whether it be sin or just a longing for more of God, I think I find myself, as I've gotten older and grown more in Him, actually just believing that the fruit of knowing Him and the fruit of trusting Him will result in me being different. And for so long, I thought that I had to be different so that I could be different. And obviously, you have to change, but I've learned that the change doesn't come from my good ideas nor my competency. And I've always loved learning things. I've always loved figuring it out, doing it wrong, learning, trying again, doing it wrong, learning, trying again. So with my walk with God, it's led me to be very self-reliant in my practices or rhythms in such a way to find the perfect one so that my life looks how it should be. Yeah. And in that process, it has had little to do with just trusting God. It has had little to do with contending more for relationship. And over the last couple of years, it has been God just stripping me of that. And any desire that I had for it to be about Danny, God has allowed me to see how incapable Danny is. He's allowed me to see what it looks like for Danny to feel like he has literally nothing to offer. But on the other end of that, I genuinely have a confidence and an assurance inside of me that sonship and relationship with God is not simply a good idea, a good practice. It is the inheritance that God has given me. It is the greatest gift He could have ever offered me. That, I said it earlier, but the notion of just a sinner saved by grace, it is minimizing the treasure that God has given us. That what relationship has allowed me to experience with God it's indescribable. And I truly believe that much of our role here on earth is to do what we can to honor and glorify God. It is not honoring and glorifying to God when we try to solve our problems on our own strength. It is, it just says that the cross wasn't enough. It says that the cross wasn't sufficient to cover our sin, that the cross wasn't, his blood was good temporarily. And the notion of the atonement and the notion of the sufficiency of the blood of Jesus says that what relationship offers is that God sees me as a son, as his son. And I'm fully convinced that Jesus was enough. Am I convinced that Jesus was enough for me? Am I convinced that Danny is worthy of the righteousness of Jesus? Am I convinced that it really isn't about my strength? And when it comes to fighting sin or desiring intimacy with God, it has been a long, long journey of learning to depend on the purity of Jesus, to depend on the righteousness of Christ. And whether it's judgment, anger, oh my gosh, coveting. Dude, I love other people's stuff sometimes. And the amount of times I look at someone driving by in a truck and I'm like, whew, like that thing looks awesome.
That's real.
But what happens in my heart is there's just a longing that Danny tries to meet. And it's something of, Danny, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Stop, 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 stop. But the invitation of Jesus is to trust him. And for me, that's been the whole journey.
Yeah.
It is learning to trust the sufficiency and adequacy of Christ.
Yeah.
And the idea that God actually looks at me and sees Jesus. That whole idea is like, bruh, like, are you kidding me?
Tell me a little bit more about how God stripped that away from you, and what does it look like differently now?
Yeah.
That he stripped that away.
How much time do we have?
How does your life look different now? Because you talked about getting the right disciplines in and the right practices. How does it look now to walk in that sonship?
As simply as I can say this, I am more convinced now than ever that Danny just simply doesn't have enough. And God has done that by putting me in positions in my life, in certain relationships, in certain roles, giving me certain responsibilities that have absolutely crushed me when I tried to do it on my own strength. When I tried to use my own wisdom, my own discernment, my own good ideas, my own strength, my own fortitude. All of that has led me to be absolutely crushed. And when I say crushed, I mean like depression, apathy, no desire to do anything, started gaining weight like crazy. It's like everything about my life seemingly declined. And I was feeling as isolated as ever, anxious. And I've never really been an anxious person until it was all about Danny all the time. Insecurity and all of that came crashing on me when I realized that, frick, my whole life is about me, my ability, my competency. And in that process, God showed me that it's not about me. So much of that has been having rhythms and disciplines in my life that draw me to a realization and acceptance that God's will for my life is better than my own. And what that has done, it's shown me that God has me where he wants me and when he wants me. So in those, it's allowed me to move forward with a measure of confidence, one, that I'm just going to be okay. The pressure's off a little bit, but also a measure of security that who I am is not contingent on what I do. And that measure of sonship, of relationship with God, has only come on the other end of, up until this point in my life, the greatest measure of crushing that God has allowed me to experience. I'm sure more is coming, and that's okay. But God's allowed me to see the fruit of Danny. He's allowed me to see the fruit of my life outside of him, and I don't like it. So for me, it's just been a measure of, God, what do you got for me? But yeah, the amount of conversations I've had with guys over the years that it genuinely seems like their weeks, their lives, they're marked and dictated by sin. They're guys trying to walk with God. They're confessing, they're open, they're honest, they're raw, like really raw, which is a gift, and I pray they never lose that. But the cost at the same time is it doesn't feel like they're free. It doesn't feel like they're actually enjoying the fact that they're no longer bound to sin. It feels like they're bound to not sinning, it sounds ridiculous, but the notion of I'm not a sinner has become their identity and not I'm a son. And it's like, for example, say I committed murder and then I got married to Cece. Say I didn't murder anyone for 10 years. Like, okay, I'm no longer a murderer. And every time I met someone, like, hey, this is Danny. He's not a murderer anymore. Or like, hey, this is Danny. He's not a murderer anymore. I would much rather want to be known as, oh, this is Cece's husband. Or this is the father of XYZ. We don't have kids, but I would much rather my identity be what God has brought me into, not what he's brought me out of.
Yeah.
And I think that's the trap of talking about sin in the way that we're tempted to. So, and I'm sure you've had similar experiences. We've talked a lot about this and our relationship to sin and our relationship to friendship, connection, relationship with God. So as we wrap up this conversation, what is a tidbit? I think I talked this whole time, but what is a tidbit that you might offer people just as an encouragement, a reminder, a refresher, whatever it is, on what it looks like to walk this out?
Oh, man. I think the biggest encouragement I can give at this moment is, I think people can hear this and realize, man, I don't measure up at all. I don't feel like a son. I don't feel like a friend of God. I don't experience that day to day. I feel like a real slave. I think the reality is, to get this in line, first, that your identity now is that you're a son, that you're a friend, that you're forgiven. That doesn't mean that you have to be right now at this second at this unattainable performance and perfection, because then you're falling into slavery. Like, there's a freedom to walk out in, actually. Yeah. Freedom is for something. It's not just freedom for the sake of freedom. It's for something. Yeah. And, I mean, you look in the biblical examples where God promises the Israelites a certain portion of the land. They actually had to go out and conquer that land. It had been given to them, but they had yet to walk out and conquer it. So my encouragement is not to lose sight of, man, I don't measure up, but man, this is God's inheritance, and that I will receive it. Yeah. That he who began a good work will complete it at the day of Jesus Christ. Yeah. That day will come, and I will continue to trust in him and walk with him hand in hand, and that's true freedom.
Yeah. We often use the prison cell illustration for coming out of sin, that we're in a prison cell, the gate is opened, the way to leave sin, to receive freedom, it's there, but we have to get up and walk out. Mm-hmm. But even that is just the beginning. Because if we don't go on and build a life, if we don't go on and build a relationship with God, the only thing that we can say we've done in life is left the cell. Yeah. And what God is inviting us into is to build something with him. And whether that's a career that he's invited you into, a family, whether it's loving your coworkers, whatever it is, he's inviting us to build. He's inviting us to contend for things with our newfound freedom. Mm-hmm. Use it for something good. Mm-hmm. And I almost am reminded of the parable of the talents and how the person who took their talent and buried it was not blessed. Yeah. But the ones who went out and stewarded what they were given were blessed. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to riff off of this, and I'll echo what you said as mine as well. But we're invited to steward what God has given us and to do something with it. That you are free, yes. You are free from sin, yes. But now what? You're a son. You're a friend, you're a daughter, you're a child. And we get to build a life with that. And our identity is no longer just not sinner, but it's son. Mm-hmm. And just that prison illustration of, you're out of the cell, good, now do something about it. Like, go buy a car, go get a job, go love your neighbor. That's not literally what I'm saying to do, but there's just so much more. There's just more.
There's always more.
There's always more. It's literally unbelievable. Yeah. Man, if people got that, if the church understood that we have an invitation to build something. What was that Wimber quote again?
If I...
Putting you on the spot.
Yeah, if I focus on him and doing his bidding, it doesn't leave a lot of time for me and my sinning.
Yeah, it's so good. And as we build that life, the fact that sin doesn't... It's like, of course, we still have to remove sin from our life until we die. Mm-hmm. But the weight that it carries just gets less and less and less and less as our attention moves to sonship more and more. So, good chat. There's so much more on this topic. It's unbelievable. But, hope that's encouraging. Hope that helps give you some framework on walking it out. But Love you guys.
Peace.
Peace.